to the Kaizen podcast.
Greg, thanks for being on today for the very first Office Hours podcast.
No problem, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So for folks that are listening, the concept of the Office Hours podcasts are Greg and I have a lot of experience as Salesforce consultants and sales operations and things like that. And what we want to do is we want to share that knowledge, but Greg and I have different perspectives on a lot of different things. And so the thought process is let's create a podcast where we go down really critical topics that everybody's asking about, and let's actually come to some sort of a conclusion where we can of the best practices in this, or maybe we'll continue to disagree. But I'd love to spend a little bit of time just doing backgrounds on us to give folks a sense of why we should be speaking to this, and then we'll talk a little bit about the format. But Greg, for folks who don't know, I mean, you've already been on the podcast, but talk to folks about your background and why. What's your pitch for why you think you are a person who happens to have a decent amount of knowledge to answer some of the questions we're going to speak to?
Yeah, sure. So my background, I started my career at an ad tech startup called AdRoll, did operations and analytics there. Went on to start Claris Designs, which is my consulting company, doing operations and analytics consulting for 100 plus startups over the last few years. More recently, I joined Keep Trucking as the VP of operations there, scaled my team from a little under 50 people to 175 plus in a year. And since moved on and am back kind of in the operations world as more of a consultant now. In terms of why I'm qualified, mostly have made a lot of mistakes. I think when you make a lot of mistakes, you can kind of brute force your way to solutions that might work. So I would say I'm probably not the most qualified, but can definitely lend my opinion to some of the problems that people are trying to solve.
Yeah, there's
How about you, Kyle? Tell me about you.
Yeah, that idea of failing more times than other people have succeeded, I think is a good way of looking at it. You've had more exposure, more at bats. My background is not dissimilar where, I actually started as an SDR at a company called Gigya, then moved into running a sales development team where I had to grow up from about 7 to 75 reps in about a year with a remote office and, team in the Philippines and all the challenges that go with that. So I really learned all of the problems that sales and sales dev folks have on a day-to-day basis. I then moved into running business operations for that company. So I was, from about 15 to 50 million in revenue, I was running business ops, which was primarily Salesforce and all the tools that touched it. So I was the one person kind of touching everything for about 350 people, and then moved on to running my own consulting business, primarily helping early, mid-stage B2B tech companies scale their Salesforce implementation. So kind of like you, I've made a ton of mistakes, but having been in consulting, and I wonder if you feel this way, is I've gotten exposure to a lot of problems you don't get when you're only at one company or only at two companies, because all the different companies that I'm working with are so varied in their type of business, the way they sell, the way customers buy. It's just so different that I get lots of different exposure. You get in similar perspective yourself?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm sure you experience this too, but I'm now more at the point where a lot of the intro calls that I go through is more me telling people to not hire me or not do something and just keep it simple, because I've seen it happen so many times. And, after you've done something 10 or 15 times, you kind of know how that movie plays out.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the idea I have for this, or the idea we've had for this podcast with the format, will be question-based, very short, concise, and to the point. So we initially posted on LinkedIn asking for folks to submit questions for the podcast, just trying to send us the problems that they're facing, and then you and I can hash this out, kind of like they're actually spending office hours with us. And so we want this to be a casual conversation that gets to the point and then gets out. We don't want to add any more information than we need to. So in the upcoming weeks, we're going to be releasing a podcast or two every single week. That's going to be shorter format when it makes sense, or longer format when it does as well. But Greg, thanks for your time today. Folks, we're really looking forward to putting these out. Please do send us our podcast topics as they come up, and we're looking to put these out as quick as we can.
Cool. Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, buddy.